So in the demo, I'm going to cover Service Designer, brokering and governance, and the HCM's command line interface tool, which we'll then use to execute the Brown to manage use case. So while I'm doing the demo, I'm going to also pepper in some updates each of these capabilities have in the latest release, that is 2019-02. So to start off with, I'm going to demonstrate service designs. And like Neil mentioned, it is truly our differentiator. So why do we need a service designer? As cloud environments continue to grow in complexity, the need for orchestration is even more. And the growing requirement is for coordination of components and the management of these dependencies between the configured service with one another. So you have got to deal with these clustered applications, multiple data centers, public, private, even hybrid clouds, and to add on top of it, the applications with their complex dependencies. So to consolidate all these moving pieces of siloed automation and manual effort, you need a master orchestration layer, essentially an abstraction layer, and that is the service designer. So right now what you see on the screen, I've logged in to HCM's management portal, which is the back end, and I have the service designer up on my screen. Like you can see, it's a graphical user interface. I can drag and drop components here from the left-hand side, and these are components which are out of the box. You can create them from scratch as well. These are components for the most commonly used enterprise applications. So my current service design, what it's trying to do is just to showcase the breadth it can span across, the breadth of technologies and tools it can span across. I've brought up this complicated service design. So it is deploying a hybrid two-tier multi-layer application, which is deploying an Oracle on a VMware, deploying front-end, be it Azure, AWS, or VMware, or OpenStack, depending on whatever the user chooses, the particular branch of the tree would be executed. So you can see the amount of technologies and the hardware it's spanning across. It's also using different automation tools. So to remind you that we have our own operations orchestration as the automation tool, but we can also leverage what you already own or what you have in your ecosystem. Let's say Ansible, Chef, Puppet, or even Micro Focus's server automation. So we will leverage the existing tools in place and the automation that you have already built to bring all of these pieces, siloed automation pieces together to form a complete service design orchestration end-to-end. So to give you an example, I'll just drag and drop a component in here. Let's say I'm going to drop Oracle database. So just drag in here, wire up the components to its parent component. All right, so now this component is going to be deploying Azure VM using Chef and deploy Oracle on top of it. Of course, you need to edit the properties of this component to match your environment. So you'll have to do those tweaks to make this happen. Now, this is a procedural type of automation. That is, you have to define how to do it and what to do in order to get to the desired state. And how do we do that is by defining it in the component. So I'm just going to open, for example, this component. And this is where you define what you're going to do as part of that component execution. So these are group of actions that get executed as part of the component execution. And these are small reusable units of work that you can just drag and drop, move around, run in sequential order, or run in parallel. And they can be plugged in and out of other service designs. So the idea here is to build once and reuse these resource offerings or group of actions as many times as you like. So right now you can see that it's going to deploy VMware, and it's using a certain provider, which is VMware vCenter. Then it's going to monitor the VM. It's going to use a monitoring tool that you have connected to it, and then you have it connecting to Active Directory to provide you IPAM service, and then you have Oracle deployment. So you see the different types of tools that this component is touching, and this is how we're providing abstraction, is by separating the flow from its provider. So the provider vCenter stores the credentials and the access point, and the flow just executes on this provider, and that makes this component a reusable component. So that's about group of actions. Now let's get to the part of how we do it. So we looked at what this component is doing. Now let's look at how it's going to do it. All right. So this component has a life cycle of its own, and the beauty of hybrid cloud management is we save the state of the service it is in and execute the action only when that state has reached. So these are small operations orchestration micro flows that can be plugged into this life cycle. So for example, in this case, it's a VMware group of actions, right? So it's going to deploy a VM, like you see here, in the provisioning stage when it's deploying the service. And it's going to unprovision the VM in the undeploying stage. Now let's say, and you can drag and drop and move it across stages, just like that. And let's say you want to add something else to the modifying stage. Let's say you want to create a snapshot the moment the VM gets deployed, and that action needs to be executed automatically. So all I have to do is point it to the OO flow that is going to create the snapshot. If I can spell right. All right. So I'm just going to create a snapshot here and map it to the right properties onto the component template, and you're good to go. So I'm just going to finish. So now your group of actions is ready. You have defined what and how you're going to achieve the desired state of that component. So similarly, each and every component gets executed as part of the service design to orchestrate a business process end-to-end. All right. So this is what gets executed as service instantiates. So what happens after the service is online? Yes, we do give the ability to users to do some actions on their services. And this is great because these actions are only available when your service has reached the deployed stage or online phase. So now the user has options to perform these actions, which is amazing because now they do not have to log tickets for each and every repetitive action that can be taken care of automation by OO flows. So these flows can be made available by your administrator to end users to execute on the resource that's provisioned. Okay, so once you're done with creating your service, which is you have built the components, you've added the what and how to get that component instantiated, now it's time to test. So we do provide capability to test the deployment from the service designer itself, and this is a very critical phase because before putting out any service out in production, you want to make sure that it's running and it's tested. So we can quickly test deployment as a service designer here and choose the one that I want to test and go ahead and deploy. Now, quick attention here, what we have in our latest update is you can mark fields as required. So you can see that some of the fields are required here. So domain name is required, template name is required, without which the test deployment wouldn't happen, wouldn't let you proceed. So that's something critical update that we have added and which makes the testing deployment seamless and quicker. All right, so now let's look at our operations orchestration piece. It's the Web Studio. Most of them who know operation orchestration have known it from a desktop studio. We do have Web Studio as part of operations orchestration's HCM. So let's get to the Web Studio. All right, so the Web Studio lets you create your automation flows with hybrid authoring capability, which means you can use the graphical user interface that you see here. Let me quickly open up a flow. You can use this graphical user interface to, if you're a non-coder like me, to just drag and drop operations in here and build your flow. Or we do provide textual authoring representation of the same flow in YAML format. You could use your favorite IDE to change the code here, commit to the SCM, and we do integrate with source control management here. You can fetch your changes in here, pull in the operation back into the flow, and when you're ready, you can debug right from this screen. So that's about being able to create flows. From here, you can test, you can change the code, commit, pull the change, debug from the screen. And then once the flow is ready, you can plug it in into your service designer. Now, many a times I get asked this question as to why don't we just create a long operations orchestrations flows to execute a service end to end? Well, that can be done. For example, I can just drag the provision VM. Let's say I want to reset the password. I want to create a change in another service management tool, for example, ServiceNow or Micro Focus Max. And then maybe I do want to provision an Azure VM here. And keep going on. I can keep creating this flow. Well, the problem with that is the flow can get really, really large in no time. And that would be really difficult to maintain. So not to forget that there is tight coupling of providers with this flow, as in you have a create change operation that's tightly coupled with the ServiceNow or SMAX access point, so which makes it very less reusable, in fact not reusable. And upgrade and rollback is next to impossible. And that's why we need an abstraction layer like service design that is composed of reusable components with smaller overflows and that can be moved around, plugged and played into different service designs. So that was in brief service designs and what to define in a service design and how to define the service design. Now, moving on to the next part of the demo, which is brokering. So what if you want to not build a service design and you just need to create quick offerings based off of your public cloud images? Yes, we do provide that capability, and that is called brokering. So let me pull up the brokering screen and make sure I'm not timed out, so I'll log back in. So what is cloud brokering? So let me pull up this. So cloud brokering is something similar to your travel websites. It's the brokering UI that presents a consolidated or aggregated view of services from multiple cloud providers. Today we support Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, and VMware. And this unified view provides a centralized location where you can identify relevant cloud services and quickly deploy them as offering with the click of a button. And in current release 2019-02, we have added support to Amazon AWS CloudFormation templates. So, you can use these templates for your service or application architectures you have created and have AWS CloudFormation use those templates to deploy the services or applications, also called as stacks. So for example, now I'm going to just pick application stack, which is the WordPress application. And this template essentially deploys a WordPress application on a single Amazon EC2 instance with a local MySQL database for storage. So all I do is click on that application image and go ahead and create offering. With the click of a button, it will populate the offering for me, and I can just go ahead and publish the offering. So right now I'm going to view the offering and publish it to the right catalog for the users to consume. All right. So I already have this offering live that I'm going to showcase here. All right. So once I subscribe to this offering, CFT or Amazon CloudFormation is going to go ahead and deploy that template, and OO is going to trigger that deployment, and these are the values that get returned to the end user. The user can come in here, check out their WordPress site. So let me do that. Let me go ahead and open the website from here and go ahead and start configuring the website. So that's an example of CloudFormation template that we have just introduced in 2019-02. All right, so that was snippet for brokering. So now that we have all of these amazing public cloud offerings that we've made available to the users are already provisioning them, what about cost tracking and visibility and reporting across them? So yes, we do provide elaborate showback reports and cost governance across your public cloud resources as well as private data centers for resources not only provisioned with HCM but also directly in AWS. And that was the piece that Neil covered in his last slide, was the update that has been made in our current release is being able to do cost comparison of resources provisioned by HCM and outside HCM. So that's really awesome. All right, so let me showcase to you our governance piece. All right, so for governance, what we do is we let you create budgets. So for example, I can create budgets. I have this test budget. I'm going to allocate an amount for it, and then let's say an email address enabled and added. So once I add this budget, I would have to associate this budget to a particular spend group, and that group would be an account in your AWS or Azure. So for example, I choose this, and now this group gets monitored for this amount spent with the subscriptions that they order with HCM. So now let me go back and show you an example of a budget that we have configured for the demo. All right, so this is the budget that you see here. It's the consumed amount versus the allocated budget and how much you're running over and the time remaining for the budget time. And you see the group associated with this budget. And on the left, you see a compliance summary of all the spending groups associated to this particular budget. All right. Now, let's say you want to check whether why is this group running over and why is the budget not sufficient and who is provisioning what resources causing the budget to go over. So I can drill down from here. It'll cross-launch reporting section for this budget report for that specific organization. So here I can accurately check as to what my budget allocation is versus my spend. The bars you see, red bars, are the spend, and the blue line is my budget allocated and the time it's running over for the month. All right. So similarly, we have other reports. What we're seeing right now is budget reports, but we do have direct reporting into Amazon and Azure APIs. So which is, it will directly talk to the Amazon API and pull reports for the accounts that have been configured for integration in HCM. So for example, I can pull Amazon reports that will pull up information of subscriptions that have been provisioned and categorized by product, similarly categorized by region, and similarly categorized by account ID. And same goes with Azure. Now, what we have added in our current release is subscription reporting, which we did not have earlier, is being able to report on subscriptions filtered by category, offering, organizations, and users, and doing showback on who is provisioned, what organization, and what's the amount or some amount for that particular organization. So that's subscription reporting, and the report that just got added in this release was spend by HCM versus spend from external resources. So it's a report of resources that have been provisioned in HCM on public cloud versus resources that have been provisioned outside without using HCM's subscription portal. So that was reporting in brief. All right, so the next part of the demo is uh, command line interface tool. All right, so the reason I want to take you through command line interface tool is because that's how we're going to execute the Brown to manage use case. And let me pull up the command line interface tool. So for those of you who do not know, we do provide HCM APIs to execute API calls from outside, from external tools, to trigger subscriptions, to query service designs, to build service designs, and so on. Lets you do administrative tasks as well as consumer tasks. But we do also provide command line interface tool that lets you do the same exact things. Now why is it helpful? Is because it helps your developer audience to consume HCM service offerings and manage the life cycle of provision services. And this will just enable the automation of your CI/CD process as well. And so this tool is installed on your desktop. You can, and then you have to trust certificate from HCM instance and just run the batch files. So that's what I'm going to do right now. All right. All right. So I'm in the folder where the HCM tool is available. So I'm just going to run the batch file. That's going to open the shell prompt for the command tool. And all I do is connect to my instance. Enter the password. So once I'm connected, this tool lets me do things like get offerings, subscribe to offerings, get the status of the subscription, get the details of the subscription. It will let me download payload of the subscription. And once I have the payload in JSON format, I can really edit the payload and change the subscription inputs and trigger a new subscription. So really handy tool for developers to deploy infrastructure on demand. Now, for the reason we're using command line interface tool today for the demo is Brown to manage. So in our latest release, we have introduced Brown to manage and availability to onboard existing servers into HCM subscription management using the command line tool. So for that, you first need is a list of servers that you're going to onboard. Now, these list of servers can be in CSV format. You can choose a discovery tool of your choice to populate this CSV file. And then once you have the CSV file, you have to import it into HCM. And for that, we use a set of 2 commands to import the CSV file. So, and if you do not have the format of the CSV file, what we can do is just generate the format here. And you have the sample file generated here. So vcenter.csv. And once you have the file generated, you can run the command. Of course, before you run the command to onboard the VM, you will have to edit the file. So let me open the file real quick for you. And that's the format, but this, I don't have Excel installed here, but it will look better. But these are the fields that are mandatory. You have the star marked, and not all of them are mandatory. Fill in these basic details and fill in the list of servers that you have, or auto-populate this form using your discovery tool, and you're ready to run the onboard command. So I already have a CSV that I populated with the fields required to onboard into HCM. So I'm just going to run that command. And I'm going to point it to that CSV file. So it's going to generate the file. Okay, so it's going to verify the CSV file that you inputted here, and it's going to return a report saying you are good to go, you're good to onboard, the file looks good, and successfully ready to onboard one server. So you can see that one server has been added, it's ready to onboard. And you can hit yes and go ahead with the onboarding. Now, depending on the number of servers, that will determine the time it takes to onboard the servers. Now, once you go ahead and click yes, the way it will appear in HCM is you will be able to see your onboarding in your operations panel. So the administrator who has onboarded this will log into the backend of HCM, log into the operations console, and he'll see active tasks pending here that say tagged, that have been tagged as onboarded, and with the right subscription status here updated in operations console. So you can see all the ones that are tagged onboarded are being onboarded using the CSV file, and they're available to the end user in the form of a subscription with the right status on them. All right. So so that was Brown to Manage, which does really provide the capability to onboard your unmanaged servers onto HCM and gives you visibility to your entire infrastructure and not having to manage in two different places, but one single pane of glass that you could manage from HCM itself. And not to forget, the users now have the ability to control the lifecycle of the servers, as in do post-deployment actions on the servers, which otherwise, if not managed by HCM, they will have to log a ticket or an email to the IT to get stuff done on those servers. Versus if they are onboarded onto HCM, now the users themselves can trigger those pieces of automation directly on the servers using the post-deployment actions that I showcased in the service design. All right. So in this brief demo, I covered the service design and the importance of service design being that it is that abstraction layer that abstracts your resources from the actual flows. It has these movable components which makes it really reusable, and that can be plugged into other service designs. You can build once and reuse these components again and again, and these components are made up of operations orchestrations micro flows, which again is the second layer of abstraction that is essential to get the stuff done on your endpoints. And these flows are also reusable and movable from one resource offering to the other and one service design to the other. So these different moving components make up the service design a really, really good master orchestrator to orchestrate a complex service, something like a hybrid two-tier, multi-tier deployment across different types of public or private cloud environments. So that was the service designer. Next was the brokering piece. We do have brokering piece from the start, but we added cloud formation template integration, and we are still working for more better integrations with other cloud vendors like Google Cloud. But for now, we have AWS, Azure, VMware, and AWS cloud formation templates. And we not only provision on cloud, we also do governance and show back on the resources that have been provisioned, as well as do governance across the budgets allocated to your organizations. So that's governance and reporting. And then finally, we do have a command line tool interface, very useful to the developers to quickly deploy infrastructure and applications on top of it through subscriptions without having to log on to HCM, or they can use the APIs. But command line tool really cool for developers to automate their CI/CD process. And the same command line tool we'll use to execute Brown to Manage, which is simply just two commands. Populate your CSV file, import the CSV file to onboard your servers live in HCM, available as subscriptions. Yep, so that's it from me for the demo. I'll hand it over to you, Neil, for further questions.
IT teams we talk to need flexible automation. They need the ability to have, as Shweta called it, composable, dynamic resources, but with the micro orchestration flows to help that work. So we've got the adaptive service designs and the master orchestrator. We've got the ability to coverage brownfield to bring into that resource dashboard all of the environments you've got and allow the users to much more easily manage that without having each one of those points of contact being an action for an operations person. And day two, lifecycle automation, and we also have that great catalog of ongoing content for you that's over 10,000 items for orchestration. It's an agile framework. It is designed to address all of the problems you need, but still sit above Chef or Puppet or Ansible or whatever you have for configuration, automation, etc. Or you can use SA for thousands of servers. Once again, unified, containerized, microservice-based, cloud-native environment, single roadmap and vision. That's why it's working so well to address that service fulfillment. On the website, there is the Open report. Just late last year, we got the technical best score. Didn't say we're the biggest. It says we literally had the most complete solution for cloud management. And why? Because we're addressing the whole problem of enterprise cloud management, not just the CMP itself. So as we wrap up the last two slides, adaptive service designs, we want to basically bring that abstraction, the intelligence, and still have building block composable resources underneath. And then over top right, we want that master orchestrator to help bring the microflows. But once again, our customers are telling us that building one monster orchestration flow is not the answer. It can't be rolled back. It can't be maintained. We need you to have the structure, the dynamic topology of the components. And then you get the content to work to build through that as well. But also, we've got middleware and database automation built in here, so building working services for the customers is much more complete and still automated. So self-service deployment, kind of middle on the left, self-service deployment for brownfield in day two. We have a whole section we really haven't spoken about today for helping your development team. Once you've specified services or environments for the developers, basically, they're pulling that as infrastructure as code from their code pipeline when you work with the developer team to define what services and what environments need to be done for DevOps. This helps get those unplanned requests for resources from the development team off the plate for the ops teams. Reduce public cloud waste and overspending. This is such an issue because customers, instead of letting the users go off to 6,000 images on both Amazon and Azure, pre-choose the correct options, they still get visibility into those out-of-the-box reports. They can still take the data out to do other things with it. It makes IT much more valuable to come alongside the business units. Over on the bottom right-hand side, remember, this is a cloud-native unified environment. So think of this as a modern tool set that we took capabilities from earlier products, but rewrote it completely into that cloud-native platform, and now you have a modern platform that can run both old and new environments for you and make that work. We also have plate spin for a cloud migration to help automate that. That's going to be awesome as we deepen that integration that exists now through command line and CSVs that you can pull data. As you migrate them to the cloud or to a different data center, you can pull those resources in to manage them here with that. Last slide, microfocus.com/hybrid cloud, and the ITOM, IT Operations Management blog is there as well.